welcome, and this is the Dog Dialectic. I am Ashley Jacobson with Airborne Canine. I am joined with Kelley Ortega from KJ Canine out in Texas. What's going on, Kelley?
Not much. It's very hot, so I come out at night.
Ooh, gross. Texas is always hot.
It was 104.
All right. Oh my God. Thankfully, it's actually a little bit cooler here today in North Carolina. I think it was 78 last time I checked. I think it says it's 84 now, but you know.
My house is 78 if I close all the curtains midday and shut it all out. So.
Don't you have air conditioning?
I do. It cannot keep up. That is how hot it is here.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We're thriving.
I love it. All right, so I do apologize if there's barking in the background. We are recording this in the middle of the workday, so dogs are doing their thing. So there may be barking, but hey, it's a dog podcast. Deal with it. If you're not hearing dog barking in the background of your own home, then I don't know what you're doing listening to this podcast anyways. Okay, so today we have a really cool topic that I think is super important, and I'm really glad we're covering it. So the topic we're covering today, we're going to be talking about drive and motivation in dogs. We're going to spend a lot of time focusing on how to create and build things like drive and motivation. But before we get into that, a couple updates. This weekend is the North American Diving Dogs Southeast Regionals, where my 3 dogs will be competing on Saturday and Sunday. Looking super forward to it. We've been looking forward to this all season. This will be the first year that we're going to regionals. We are not going to be vending or anything like that. We're just going to be competing and enjoying the event. But if anyone else is going to be down there, I look forward to seeing you. Let's see what else is coming up. We have the Blue Ridge Working Dog Club East Coast Regionals for the Protection Sports Associations. That's coming up in a few weeks. We have the Tutela PSA Club Trial, which is coming up in a few weeks as well. The Midwest Regionals. All these events we are going to be vending at. So look for the Airborne Canine tent. We'll have plenty of goodies. We just got a whole another shipment of Red Line Canine stuff. Viper Canine, Herb Springer, all sorts of good stuff is all in stock. We got new soft leather leashes. I know those are a personal favorite of some of the highest level competitors, so we know that everyone's been asking for them, so we got them in. What else do we do? We are going to be at the American Schützen trial coming up hosted by the Coastal Carolina American Schützen Club. That's going to be mid-September, I want to say. We will be vending there. I'm contemplating doing Medics BT. Why not? Right? But haven't really decided yet. Kelley, before we get into today's topic, any updates for KJ K9's events, training? What do you got going on?
I have a couple things going on, and I may come at you for one of those leashes, because as much as I love my Sure Grip leash, which they are great, I know you also carry those, I have abused the crap out of mine, and it's starting to get like weirdly gummy, I think because of the heat. So I will be coming for those leather leashes.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so I've been putting out a ton of content on my YouTube. I've started this new series called Train-In Chats, where it's literally like kind of podcast style where I'm just talking about whatever I'm talking about, mostly so I don't have to edit videos and things. So that's on my YouTube. It's kjk9.dogtraining. Tons of fun stuff on there. I've got tons of fun stuff on all my social media. Ashley does too with all her Airborne Canine stuff. I'm still doing my free group classes on Monday, our local park. You can get on my Facebook for more information on that. We've been having a really good turnout, even if you're not planning on working on whatever we're planning to work on that day, because we're just going through basic obedience. I have a couple members that come just to work on socialization with their dog and neutrality. So it's really great for everybody. And yeah, I think that's about all of my updates. Now that I do have my bite suit, she finally came from Belgium, so we're happy. Lightly offering decoy services to already started protection dogs. If you just don't have a decoy local to you in this area, that's the kind of things that I am offering.
Right. That reminds me too, we're going to be starting up some group classes also. Kelley, you inspired me. We are starting up group classes coming the end of September. We are going to be also starting up again our tracking club now that the weather is getting a little bit better. And we are also still having our NC Working Dutch Shepherd Club, which is also our advanced obedience club. So if you're not looking to join a breed specific club and you just want to join the Airborne Canine Obedience Club, it's the same thing. So come on out. We're going to be posting our entire class and club schedules shortly. But yeah, super excited.
I wish I could come to tracking club because I need to learn tracking.
Yeah, it's I like the idea of having the club because it's definitely more of a forcing function.
Yeah.
Like the techniques itself and the actual skills that go into teaching a dog to track are not in of themselves difficult, but having a reason to get up and go do it on a regular basis is the hardest part.
Felt.
All right, you ready to get into today's topic?
I am very ready.
Fabulous. Okay. So, we're going to be talking about drive and motivation in dog training. So, before we get into any of the building drive and stuff like that, let's talk about what is.
So, are you asking me that?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So, drive is basically the want the dog has for particular things. I don't know how deep you want me to get into that, but it's just the dog desire to achieve different things. So there's several types of drive. I don't know if we're going into that yet, but
I mean, we could. So what's the difference between drive and motivation?
So drive is the dog's internal desire. So from the start, we can kind of alter the drive a little bit, but we'll talk about that later. But that is the dog's like internal, I know I want this. Motivation is us typically like using things to motivate the dog. So you may add in other things. That's a horrible explanation. I don't know how to put that in good terms.
That's okay. It's a tough question that I don't think a lot of trainers really think about, but I think there's a lot of benefit to having a better understanding of the difference between drive and motivation. You know, I think for most dogs getting started, we're really focusing on motivation. And for me, the way I look at the difference is drive is an intrinsic desire to achieve some type of goal, whereas motivation is more of an extrinsic, like, I want this thing, right? So, like, we can actually look at food and food desire as drive or motivation. So, a dog who is hungry is food motivated, right? My dog wants the food because they are hungry. That is a very like superficial, like that can vary, right? So if my dog is not hungry because they had a big breakfast, then they're not going to want that food. So motivation is a much more superficial type of encouragement for the dog to perform behaviors. Whereas drive, I feel, is something that is much more deeper ingrained. So for instance, like I do a lot with building food drive in my dogs to the point where my dogs, like my chihuahuas, even after a full meal, will like do your taxes and do backflips for like a piece of stale kibble that was left under the couch. And that's because for them, it's like getting that gold star, right? You know, getting a gold star for acing your spelling test, the gold star is worth nothing. But intrinsically, it makes you feel really good and you want to get that recognition for doing a good job. And so that drive is an intrinsic motivator. And so like whether it's for a toy, like you'll see this in like scent detection dogs who have really high drive for doing scent detection work. You'll see them indicate, right? And they'll get rewarded with their ball and they'll take their ball and go right back to the source of the odor with their ball in their mouth because their drive for the behavior is much higher than just the motivation to get that toy. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That was a very better explanation than mine. And chihuahuas, let me make sure mine's not behind my chair. Okay, no, she's good. I don't know where she's at, but she's fine.
Oh, chihuahuas are the best.
She is the best. Oh my god, I walk in, I'm like, Dee Dee, did you wee wee? And she's like, get the fuck away from me.
Yes.
She's like a walking cigarette. That's like the best way to explain
Oh,
Dee Dee. But
oh, I love her.
I give her so many baths and her head still smells like cigarettes. And her owner didn't smoke. I think the dog just smells like cigarettes.
That
I
is
think
so weird.
it's a personality trait at this point.
Oh my god. So the way we'll talk about the process of creating motivation and building drive later, but I do think that they are connected. I do think that even a dog who doesn't naturally have drive, like drive can definitely be something that's genetic. There are dogs, and we'll talk about the different types of drives that genetically have certain types of drives more than others. And we're going to talk about the different types of drives now. But I do also think that those drives can be built, and we're going to talk about that today too. So let's talk about the types of drive. What types of drives are there?
So this gets tricky because there are several opinions on this. So I'm just going to say the ones that I recognize, but there is no comprehensive list anywhere for this. So you have prey drive, the dog's desire to chase, eat, kill. You have the pack drive, the dog's desire for affection and social ability. And then I have another that I am completely now forgetting all the words to, but I have a third one. My goodness gracious, my brain is blank.
I know. I'm just gonna let you stew in it for a second.
No, for real, I'm like just not freaking thinking of it. But main ones I'm looking at typically are prey drive and pack drive, because prey drive, that's going to cover your dog's ball drive or toy drive, which again, so when you hear toy drive, prey drive and stuff, and really that's more of a subset of, toy drive, ball drive, that kind of stuff. That's going to be a subset of the prey drive. So if I say my dog is really food driven, that means my dog has higher prey drive, higher desire to kill, fight, eat. But of course, those subsets can all be different in themselves. So, like, my dog has very high food drive, but her play, toy, desire, whatever, was not very high originally. So it is kind of all a subset of itself, in my opinion. And then, of course, pack drive is like, if you have a dog that very much values like chest rubs and butt scratches and hanging out and is just like generally trainable off of social ability, that kind of falls under the pack drive as well. I can't think of the third one. I think there's three. I don't know.
So
Ashley's gonna tell us.
The most common third drive that you are probably referring to is defense drive. Or other people call it like the fight drive.
Okay, so then I guess there is two, because I just don't think about the list, because I don't 100% believe in that one. Okay. Because your dog wants to stay alive. You know what I mean? And to me, a dog that enjoys the fight, the tussle, whatever, that still falls under prey drive to me, because you're still chase, kill, etc. So I'm not a big subscriber to defense drive, fight drive, things like that, because to me, any animal, put them in a corner and threaten them enough, they're going to try to fight back, because natural selection has picked the animals that don't just die willingly. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's how I process it.
No, I would definitely not agree, because if you're familiar with drive channeling, which as a decoy you should be, right? What we're doing is taking the dog between the two drives. And I do think that they have very different intent, right? So our drives are the means to an end, right? Prey drive is the desire to chase, capture, kill, consume for food and survival. But defense is another form of survival, right? All the drives are ultimately for the survival of the animal and the species. It's an evolutionary imperative. But defense, like, you do not capture, kill, consume, like, other predators, things that are trying to kill you. Like, you're trying to defend yourself, essentially, at that point. And in our dogs, what you'll see is that when a dog is being threatened, when a dog is in danger from a predator, they have a few choices. They have they can flee, they can, avoid, right? You'll see dogs who cower, who submit. And then the last option is to fight back, right? When you have no other option, how much does it take for you to go from I don't want to fight to I do want to fight? And that's that, that's that defense drive. Now, we're not really going to be focusing on defense drive because it's not going to be something we're going to use in most of the dog training we do with our clients. But I mean, I think it is something that you'll see, like clients do tend to see with problematic behaviors, right? Defense drive, I think, could be what you see in resource guarding.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I kind of still a little bit disagree, because to me, the drive is things the dog is naturally wanting to accomplish for, survival, like you said. But to me, defense isn't something most really dogs want to do. Like, no one wants to be held at gunpoint. Does that make sense?
So, no, well, they also don't want to be hungry.
Yeah.
Right? So the drive is to satiate that desire, because defense occurs when there is a threat to them or to their resource. So if someone is coming close to their food or their toy and they show defensive behaviors, the growling, the snarling, the barking, the biting, they're trying to achieve a goal. And that goal is for that threat to get the fuck away. Right. Yeah. And when we do drive channeling, we're taking and we're saying, hey, the faster you go into defense, the faster you show me that aggressive response, the faster I go away. Right. Or the faster I become a prey. Right. Instead of a predator. So the drives are basically the means to an end to achieve some type of goal. For our prey, it's, satisfying the desire to chase, capture, kill. For defense, it's the desire to alleviate a threat. The social pack drive, that's actually, I think it is a desire to have the social connection, which I think in the most simplest basic evolutionary terms is the sex drive. Yeah. Right.
Which is why, by the way, to freak all of our viewers out, if your dog enjoys tummy rubs and chest scratches and butt scratches, that it's not sexual to the dog, but that goes along with the sex drive. Just imagine and you'll figure it out.
I mean, that's why humans have social circles, because it puts you in close contact with potential breeding partners.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't have friends. No. So when we talk about things like drive, that's going to be that really that intrinsic desire to act. And that is very, very important when we get into our dog's desire to perform behaviors for us when there's no immediate motivator, meaning there's no present food. There's no toy dangling in front of them, bribing them to do behaviors. So I think creating drive is something that we need to consider when we're training for our dogs to be able to perform in the absence of rewards. But we get there through the use of motivators, through the use of the cookies, the treats, the toys, whatever it is. And we'll talk about how we use that in a process to create the drive to perform. Right? So, speaking of which, Kelley, tell me a little bit about why drive and motivation is important for how we train.
So when we train the same way, because Ashley trained me. But well, I guess I probably train a little bit different now. We've both grown, but anyway,
we're always changing.
We are always changing, but to get good quality behavior that is reliable and looks nice and all of the things you want the dog to like doing the behavior. You want them to want to work for you. And if they're just working to avoid punishment, what you're going to end up with is, at best, a very flat dog. You're going to see the dog is going through the motions. Their tail isn't probably wagging a whole lot. They're just kind of existing to exist. And you can very clearly, if you've been around enough dogs and trained dogs, you can pretty clearly see which dog is wanting to do the behavior and which dog is doing the behavior out of avoidance. And we're not going to name names, but we do know a very large scale training franchise that often takes a little less time to create motivation. And so we see in their dogs, they're doing the stuff, but they're mostly just being avoidant. And that's a big issue when you start getting into stuff like behavior mod, because that gets very tricky. Yeah, I don't know how much you need to talk on that.
Oh, behavior mod?
No, just the whole subject. I feel like I've covered it. I don't know.
No, I think that's about it. Yeah.
Cool.
You know, I think when people are coming in for training, what they're looking for is, I want my dog to do the things I want them to do when I want them to do it. And I always tell people, like, you know, we do emphasize consistency, where, like, if I ask my dog to do something, I say it one time and then I make sure that my dog does it. But, you know, I think people hear that and think, oh, you know, if your dog doesn't do it, then they automatically get corrected, and that's how you get your dog to do it every time. But like you were saying, if you just rely on that, you're going to have a dog who's very flat, very slow in behaviors, very reluctant, very, you know, maybe kind of like doesn't have initiative, right? And so when we're training, we try to create dogs who are, you know, preemptive with their desired routine, meaning, hey, we're going to go for a walk today. And so my dog knows when it's walk time, and they go sit politely at the door waiting for me to put the leash on. Or, hey, it's dinner time, and my dogs go into their kennels without having to be asked and sit politely and wait for their food, right? That's, you know, when we build training around motivation and desire to perform, we're going to get dogs who take the initiative and do things without needing to be asked, instead of dogs who maybe are afraid to take initiative because when they do something wrong, they get corrected every single time. You're going to have a dog who's afraid to act without direction. And then you're going to be really having to micromanage your dog a lot more. So I always say a really reliable dog is a dog who loves to do the behavior first, and then afterwards is held accountable for it. And the way we get our dog to love behavior is through that motivation.
And a big point I want to make too is there's a reason that most of the trainers you see online doing cool fancy stuff have things like border collies, Malinois, like those higher drive breeds. And this is because those dogs will naturally, if they're well bred and genetically good, because we always have dumpster fires, they're the exception, not the rule. But those dogs always have that little bit of hope in their brain. So you could, you know, I'm not recommending it, but you could train that dog to a point of very, like, making them very avoidant of punishment and less reliant on rewards. And they're always going to have that little bit of hope in their head. But if you take an off-breed dog, so like my little dumpster fire golden retriever mix Gracie, if I train her solely off punishment and no rewards, she's going to be flat. So I have to figure out a way to balance that intensity and the accuracy. Whereas when we take our higher drive, crazier dogs, we naturally are going to have a good bit of intensity to the point where you're like, holy crap, someone can get this thing. And you're having to bring in that accuracy as well. And so you'll see very, you know, if you put your hands on a lot of different dogs, you'll see that this dog needs more motivation, this dog needs less motivation, and maybe it needs a little bit more punishments. It is a very, very fluid thing. And I'm still, all the time with my dog, I'm still always going back and forth on intensity and accuracy and intensity. And one thing screwed up when the other gets really good.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
That is definitely something to consider as well.
Yep. Yeah. And yep. So when we're when we have clients come in and they do their consultation with us, you know, it's kind of our chance to give them a couple little tips and advice to help them get started. I always tell people, whether you sign up or not, I want you to go home knowing more about how you can help your dog than when you got here. But two, so like if they do sign up, so let's say, you know, hey, they're going to do a private lesson program with us, or even if they're going to do a board and train program, it's not starting that day. It's probably going to start sometime in the next couple weeks, maybe that week later on, or maybe in a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, who knows. But what I do is I tell them to go home and give them a lot of tips on how to create and increase motivation for our client dogs. Like I said, drive. So, like, let's say the dog doesn't have much drive. Drive is going to end up being a product of consistently motivating your dog. So, we always teach them to start building that motivation first. So that way, when they do come in, the dog is motivated to work for us, right? So we can start building behaviors based on their desire to do what we want them to do because we're motivating them to. But if you come into like a lesson, like your first lesson, and your dog is not motivated for anything, meaning they don't give a shit about food because they're super full and they've been spoiled with all this extra yummy food with gravy on top every single meal just to get them to eat because they don't eat if they don't put the special sauce on top. Trust me, I've heard it. It's ridiculous. Or, oh yeah, I have to like put cheese in it, or I have to put like cooked chicken, or I have to put it in the microwave in order to get my dog to eat. Like, your dog's not super motivated for food. Or if they don't give a crap about toys, like a lot of my pet dogs don't really care about toys. Some of them do, but sometimes they don't. So like if they're coming in and we're trying to ask them to do stuff, there's no reason for them to do it. There's no reason for them to want to do it because they're not getting anything that they want out of it. So let's talk a little bit about how we can start to create and manufacture motivation for like dogs who generally are your average pet dog, your average drive, average motivation, not your Malinois, not your Border Collies, not your like high prey drive dogs, not your high toy drive dogs, not your food hounds, like the dog who comes in who could take it or leave it when it comes to treats and cookies, who doesn't really care about toys. Let's talk about how we can start to build motivation.
Yeah, and this is great because both of my dogs, I've had to do with both of them. So for food drive, it's pretty simple. Well, food motivation, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep saying food drive because that's just casually how we say it, but we've listened.
It can be fairly synonymous. However, I do think there are differences. However, we can interchange them for the most part for the purposes of our conversation.
Yeah, but it definitely falls under the prey drive aspect. But for food motivation, we use deprivation training. So deprivation training is basically withholding the food until the dog is willing to take it out of your hand or work for it or whatever, get them a little bit hungry. And if you're hearing that and going, oh my God, you're starving the dogs, it's not for like 3 weeks on end. Like it's not ideally, it's not really changing the weight of the dog. And if it is, typically that dog was overweight when they came in and we're just getting them back down to trim. But the dog is not going to starve itself until it's emaciated for the most part. So we'll kind of just withhold food until they're working for the kibble. You really don't want to withhold and use treats. One, for nutritional issues, and two, you're kind of undoing the work you're doing trying to get the dog to work for the kibble. So we use a lot of that. We use a lot of deprivation training with the kennel to where your choice is come out and train and eat and all this good stuff happens, or you can go be bored in the kennel for a little bit. Again, when I'm saying all this stuff, I'm not saying lock them away for all 8 hours of the day and never see them again. We're giving them like 20-minute cool down breaks almost. And then, with the toys, it got a little bit trickier for me with the toys.
Well, let's focus on the food stuff first. I think we can go a little bit deeper into food because I know it's like to us, it seems simple, right? The dog's not hungry. The dog's not food motivated. When the dog is hungry, the dog is food motivated. And when we're talking about deprivation, the concept of withholding food, I don't think like is entirely accurate for how we're actually doing it because we're not really withholding the food. We're just changing the only way that the dog can access the food. Yeah. So when the dog is here in training with us, right, if we're doing a board and train, let's say, we take the dog out every hour to go train. And the dog comes out, maybe we get to the door or maybe the dog goes potty and we offer them a handful of food from our hand. If the dog looks at that handful of kibble and sticks their nose up at it, that's totally fine. They have the opportunity to eat that food right then and there, and they're going to get that opportunity all throughout the day. And if they say, I don't want it, that's totally fine. At some point, if they keep turning their nose up to that food that's being offered to them, eventually they're going to want to take it. Right? So that's going to be the big difference between, deprivation and starvation. So starvation is where we are intentionally not giving the dog the opportunity to access food. Like, we're not offering it to them. We're not giving them any opportunity to eat. This is not something that we actually do with like this very like minor example. Like, if my dog is going to a training class at 10 a.m. and my dog usually eats breakfast at 7 or 8, I might not give them breakfast that morning because I want them to be a little bit more hungry when we get to training at 10. So I think that would be what we would call, like, maybe starvation. I don't know. But that's where I'm literally just not giving my dog the opportunity to eat. Yeah. But what we're doing with our client dogs most of the time is providing them opportunities all day long to eat if they want to, but the only way that they get to eat is from our hands. Just making sure that, we're really kind of dumbing down this process, because I mean, yeah, Kelly, you and I, we know what we're doing. We know, like, oh yeah, we're gonna only let the dog eat, during training, but I don't think people fully understand, like, hey, we're not withholding the food. We're offering it to them, but it's just in this very controlled circumstance. If you want to eat, it's going to be from my hand. If you're going to eat, it's going to be on the place bed. If you're going to eat, it's going to be in the kennel. And so if you want to go ahead and describe a little bit more at that really simplistic, like really Barney style, how do we do that same type of deprivation for kennel and activity?
So basically, I think this is where you were going with this, but basically, when a dog is like, let's say the dog's just wandering around the house and it's allowed on the couch when it wants and it just kind of does whatever. When you say, hey, it's time to train, a lot of times the dog is going to be like, well, we're talking about like a brand new pet dog kind of thing, not a dog that's been in training. The dog's going to be like, well, why would I want to go do that when I have all of these other options to do? I can go do whatever I want. So we will kind of utilize the kennel to say, hey, your options are a little bit more limited here. And if you don't want to work, you're going to be a little bit bored. So we're offering them the training sessions, like you were saying with the food. We're offering them opportunities to come hang out and do fun things. But if they don't want to participate, they get to go hang out in the kennel for a little bit. And we're not really using the kennel as like a bad place. We're not yelling at them and throwing them in there. I like to kind of describe the kennel more neutral than anything. Technically, it is still negative punishment. We're taking away the opportunity of the dog to go do something, but it's obviously with reason there.
So I think of like the kennel too very much the same way. Like, I like to think of it as like your bedroom as a kid. Right? When you were a kid, if you got in trouble, they sent you to your room, right? Now, it didn't mean that you hated your room. Your room had your toys, your stuff, your furniture, your books, or whatever you wanted that was like in your bedroom, right? Your bedroom is a place where you might normally hang out. But let's say I was out playing video games with my sibling and we got into a fight and, mom says, that's it, no more video games, go to your room. I'm probably going to be a little bit upset about that, because compared to playing video games, the room is much less enjoyable, right? I would much prefer to be playing video games. So, like you said, that negative punishment is just, removing my access to do the thing I want to do, essentially. And so for our dogs, it works exactly the same way. And I think that also when it comes to the toy stuff, so many people just have dog toys laying around their house, laying all over the floor, on the couch, on the dog bed. Maybe you have a basket full of dog toys, but there's always the access to the toys. So like when you say, hey, let's go and play with this toy together, your dog's like, why? I could just play with it any other time. I don't really necessarily feel like doing it right now. But if the only time the dog gets to play with it is when we say it's time to play with it, and if they don't want to play with it, we say, that's fine. You can go back in your kennel. Then maybe next time they come out, they'll go, okay, I'm bored. I'd rather do something rather than nothing. Hopefully they'll want to play with their toys. So using the deprivation techniques to increase that motivation is something that I think a lot of trainers do, whether they mean to do it or not, whether they understand that that's what it is that they're doing. Now, unfortunately, I think that there is sometimes a misunderstanding. I think this is definitely more common among like our working dog side, whether it's like your hunting dogs or your protection dogs, your police dogs, where they kind of take it a bit to the extreme, and you'll see dogs who are getting more on like the emaciated side where it becomes unhealthy. And I think that when we get into like behavior mod cases, we have dogs who are so stressed that they're not motivated to eat, right? Have you ever had an instance like that?
I have.
So we're talking about how we increase motivation, right? And the two, like, someone want to talk about, as you know, we've been going through this, you know, when we first started talking about this topic, we mentioned differences between motivation and drive. And, you know, when we're talking about increasing motivation, I tend to think of it as a fairly passive process, right? Meaning you want to increase the food motivation, dog just doesn't eat. Eventually the dog is going to get hungry. It's a very passive process for us as the trainer slash handler. Now, if I want to increase my dog's desire for toy, right? You know, I reduce my dog's access to that toy, and hopefully that will increase my dog's desire for that toy. So when we start to talk about building drive, right? Drive, I think, is that the key to the dog doing behaviors in the absence of the reward, meaning there is no reward immediately present, you know, bribing the dog into behavior. There's no treat pouch, right? No imminent reward that the dog is aware of. Drive is what is going to create a dog who wants to do the behaviors for, like you said, with those high drive dogs, right? The quote unquote high drive dogs, is that they have that hope. Right?
Yeah.
Even though I don't see a treat pouch, even though I don't see a toy under your armpit, even though I don't see, you know, the reward that I'm currently working for, there's hope that it's coming. And the process we do to build that drive, because even though a dog who may not be genetically high drive or have drive, we can build that drive and we can really artificially manufacture that as well. But the process is a lot different, right? This is going to be a much more active process. So like we said, building motivation is passive, right? Removing, you know, deprivation. We're going to have deprivation where a dog can't access those things that we want to motivate them. And so they have to perform behaviors to get those things. Motivation, very extrinsic, very, you know, reward from the outside. Whereas the drive, what we're going to do is we're going to actively create classically conditioned association with the behavior leading to the reward.
Okay.
Have we done an episode on classical conditioning yet?
I think we've talked about it a good amount. I think we have.
So I want to talk about how we use classical conditioning to create and build up drive. So Kelley, before we do that, can you just briefly, for our audience who maybe hasn't been up to date with all of our episodes up to this point, review a little bit about just the general concept of classical conditioning?
Yeah, classical conditioning is basically changing the dog's emotional response to a stimulus. So very emotional, very slow going. That's it. It's just an emotional reconnection.
So it's basically like, I just want to dumb it down a little bit more.
Yeah.
If we can. You know, it's basically how our dog feels about something, right? And classical conditioning is how we change how our dog feels about it. Now, our dog might not really give a damn about a specific toy, right? Our dog might not have what we're going to talk about, toy drive. But if every time maybe my dog has really high food motivation, every time my dog sees that toy, I can reward my dog, right? I'm trying to get my chihuahuas to do dock diving. Why? I don't know. I like to challenge myself. But in order to do dock diving, they have to want to go get a toy.
Yeah.
And so I'm building their toy drive by teaching them to fetch that toy. And when they fetch it, they get food. When they retrieve it, they get food. When they chase it, they get food. When they hold it in their mouth, they get food. When they tug on it, they get food. When they pick it up and put it in a basket, we do all sorts of tricks with that toy. So that way, what's going to happen when my dog sees that toy, they get really excited, right? Now, maybe they get excited because they anticipate food, right, in the early stages. But what's going to happen is eventually, right, even if they're not hungry, like I said, my chihuahuas are very food driven, which means they will do your taxes for a piece of kibble, even on a full stomach. We're creating this artificial, in the beginning, this artificial association with the toy leads to food, which then creates that anticipation and that excitement. And even though, like, I've been teaching Bruno to do the whole put your toys away game where they pick up a toy, put it in the basket, get another toy, put it in the basket. And he'll do this for like 5-6 different toys. And one repetition of this takes him probably about a minute to do. And he does it all for one itty bitty teeny tiny piece of kibble. And he'll do it like a dozen times. And each time do it for that one piece of kibble. And it's not because he's hungry. It's not because he just loves food. It's because that kibble is signifying that he's done it well, right? So we can actively build this really positive association through this process of this behavior produces consequence, right? A reward, some type of result. And you'll find, like, if you've ever seen a little kid who's discovered a light switch for the first time, when they flip that light switch, the light turns on, they'll sit there and switch that light switch all day and go, this is the coolest thing ever, because they're creating that change, right? And they think it's amazing. They think it's so cool. Our dogs can do the same thing with rewards. Hey, when I do this behavior, I force my mom to give me a piece of kibble, right? If you're a fan of The Discerning Dog and Anne Quigley and their, dog training education system, Anne Quigley talks about like cues and markers as verbal contracts you make with your dog. And so if I tell my dog to put his toys away, right, that's a verbal contract saying if you do it, you're going to get some type of reward afterwards, right? So when our dog understands that contract, they start to anticipate because they know it's coming. And that anticipation, right, we talked about that hope in those high drive dogs. That is that drive. That is what's, making them want to do the behaviors, because they have that hope and anticipation for the reward, which becomes a classically conditioned response. That reward does not need to be present in the moment for our dog to do the behavior for the hope of that reward.
Yeah.
So this is done through repetition. We create routine and pattern through repetition. And that pattern is what allows our dog to anticipate what's coming, i.e. that reward. So it's important to remember that if we're creating motivation, it's a very passive process, right? We're just increasing our dog's need for something by depriving our dog of it. But drive is built through creating the anticipation. And we do that through a very active, repetitive process that teaches our dog that routine and pattern.
Yeah. And when you're working with that drive and you're getting the dog to want to do things for the sake of doing things, there are certain dogs where you'll realize that the dog actually enjoys the build up to the reward more than the reward itself. So they're thriving off that buildup of dopamine, and then once they get that reward, it'll actually crash, and they're like, "Oh shit! Now I don't like what was that for?" You know what I mean? I actually have a client dog right now. We did a lesson today, and she's like, "I find when I jackpot him, afterward he just he's just not good," and I'm like, he's probably enjoying the buildup more than the actual reward itself. So you can kind of find dogs that are into the anticipation more than the actual outcome of the situation.
Oh, yeah. And if you read any studies on gambling addiction, right? So they've done a lot of studies because gambling addiction is a real thing that affects millions of people across the world. And if you think about somebody at a slot machine, right? They put a quarter in, they pull the thing, they get quarter back, right? They put a quarter in, they pull a thing, maybe they get $1. They put a quarter in, they pull the lever, they get nothing, right? And they'll sit there and do this for hours and hours and hours. Maybe every once in a blue moon, maybe every few days or few weeks, they'll hit a jackpot and they'll get $20, $50, $100. So scientists have actually done a study measuring those dopamine levels, measuring all sorts of scientific stuff like wavelengths and brain waves. I don't know, science stuff. But What the studies have shown for my dumb mammalian brain is my lizard brain, the dumb part of my brain, is that it shows there's a huge dopamine dump after a jackpot, at the time of the jackpot, right? So you're absolutely right that we can create this building of enjoyment and pleasure in the behavior. And you'll find that, the jackpot, there is a lot of value in it because that's what it's building to. And if there never is a jackpot, then you're not going to get that full effect out of that building process because it's not building to anything. But if once in a blue moon, we do give them that jackpot, we have to be very careful to, have the appropriate follow-on behavior. Dog goes away.
Yeah.
Right? Activity is over. Jackpot and done. And if you try to go back and do more, 25-cent repetitions, like they're going to go, fuck that. I just got my jackpot. I just got $1,000. I don't want your quarter. I'm rich right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be something that's, a huge part of the training process as well. All right. So for, building drive, when I think about building drive, I think about it in a very, very holistic approach, right? We do combine all the techniques we were talking about earlier with that motivation, like that deprivation, whether it's food or toy or whatever. But when we're talking, I think we can take it in a very holistic picture because, we said that drive is a product of anticipation, right? And you talked about it as well. It's that building of dopamine through the process, right? Through the process of repetition, through the process of the activity or performance or whatever, we're building and building and building. And, I was talking about it's a very active process where we're creating patterns that our dog recognizes. So the best way that I like to describe it or build it into a very effective process is creating a routine or structure that leads to the production of that drive. Routine gives our dogs that anticipation, right? Like I said, when it's about mealtime and I'm like, oh, I better go feed my dogs know it. They see me just move a certain way, move towards where the food is, and all 7 of them go in their kennels, right? My chihuahuas, they're in their crates. I have some kennel runs too for my bigger dogs. My chihuahuas are in their crates. And I swear they run into them so fast, you just see the kennel, the crate go flying backwards because they bust in there with a lot of drive. Yeah. Right? And it's based on that routine and that anticipation. What do you got to add? Anything?
I don't think I have anything to add. I feel like this topic was a great topic, but there's not a crazy amount of pathways to drift around. You know what I mean? It's kind of a little bit straightforward to a point.
Well, let's talk about the other less conventional or less leveraged drive. So let's talk about pack drive. Do you ever use pack drive in your training with your dogs?
I actually have. So one of my more recent board and train clients, so the dog was a weird dog. It's the best way to describe him. He's definitely one I'm going to remember. And if you're a dog trainer, you understand that doesn't always mean good things. But he was a very stoically weird dog, but he very much enjoyed pets and praise and pack drivey type things. So for him, the kibble was less important than me kind of giving him head rubs. And I also use pack drive for my sport dog, Gracie, my little golden retriever mutt, because not that I'm really planning on trialing her, but if the time ever did arise, obviously you can't have toy rewards, food rewards, stuff like that on a trial field. And so I've actually classically conditioned her pack drive to be higher, to where getting a face rub mid-heel is amazing. And I can use that as a reward when I don't have rewards. So that's been pretty nice for her in general.
Yes. I like to use pack drive in healing as well, but a little bit differently. So when we're talking about pack drive, when we talk about a pack, it's a group of dogs who cohabitate, right? They are together. They move together, they hunt together, they live together. They are generally together. And Like, if you ever see a bunch of dogs who live together, more often than not, they're gonna be in like the same room, right? If
Yeah.
I have all my dogs out with me and I get up to go to the bathroom, guess what? They're all getting up and going with me, right? So we actually do use this in the training, right? Now, I don't just say, "Hey, we're just going to use prey drive today. We're just going to use food motivation today. We're just going to use pack drive today." Like I like to train very efficiently, and I like to come at these training skills from all angles. So, if I'm teaching heel, if my dog's doing a good job, I can give them a food reward, right? I can give them a pat on the head, tell them good boy. They like toys. I can use a toy reward. But if my dog, let's say my dog gets a little bit ahead of me, one of my favorite things to do, and this is something that I think takes a little bit of practice for newer handlers, is I turn around and walk away. I
Yeah.
might not give them a correction, right? I might not give them a reminder command, right? I might not do anything. And all of a sudden, like they're just walking along and they turn and I'm gone. And they go, "Oh, shit, where's my mom?" Right? And that shit moment of where'd my mom go can be like a punishment in of itself, almost an unconditioned punishment too, right? Because maybe I don't even warn him, I don't give them like a negative punishment mark or anything like that. I just disappear. And pack drive can be an extremely powerful drive that's very under leveraged. And so it can really teach our dog they have to pay attention because mom's crazy and she just might wander off at any given moment, right? Now, I think that the pack drive, you can leverage it so much more when you have a very good structured relationship, a relationship based on clear communication, meaning, hey, my dog understands that I make the rules of the house, I control their access to resources, and our dogs have a very high value in our presence and our communication, right? And so that way, our relationship with them and that pack relationship with us is so much higher value to them, right? When we're talking about like creating food motivation, we're talking about increasing the value of the food. Like just like money. Like I know you like to refer to it this way too. We think of food as our dog's currency, right? Me, I've been training dogs long enough and I was in the military for 10 years. I've had careers where, I've gotten a good paycheck. Where today, if you ask me to go work at McDonald's for a minimum wage, I'm going to probably tell you to screw you, right? But if I, for some reason couldn't be a dog trainer and couldn't get a job doing anything better anywhere else, and I couldn't afford to buy groceries, and I was starving, and the only way I could get enough money to go buy groceries was to work for $7.25 an hour at McDonald's, that $7.25 is going to look a lot better to me now because I'm getting a lot hungrier. I need to pay my bills. I got to keep a roof over my head. And if that's the only choice I got, I'm going to take it. So, we do the same thing. We increase the value of whatever it is our dog needs. And our dogs need to be members of a pack. And we want to let them know that their relationship with us, it's not like necessarily free, right? In like a wolf pack or a pack of wild animals, like each animal in the pack has a job to do. Otherwise, you'll see animals can be cast out if they are, not doing their part as part of that, pack unit, let's say. Now, we are not like necessarily like pack like mentality trainers of pack method trainers, or you gotta be the alpha or like whatever. But it's about understanding the rules of the pack. So even in wild dogs, wild creatures, you have like the dogs who are responsible for hunting. You have the dogs who are responsible for taking care of the puppies, the young. You have different members have different roles. And I think it's important for us to do that as well. And that allows our dogs to see a lot more value in us, because if the dogs see us as equal, there's no real need for them to see us as higher value if we are of the same value as our dog. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling at this point.
I know. I feel like we're just kind of stretching it a little bit longer. We had a big technical difficulty halfway through, which if you notice my camera angle has changed. I've changed devices and I'm on my phone's hotspot. We're desperate.
Yeah. We did have some pretty serious technical difficulties. So if you're listening to this and go, wow, that was a very sudden, abrupt subject change, that's why. Because we forgot what we were talking about.
Yeah, we can never remember these things. No. Yeah, I use Pack Drive a lot, especially when I'm working recalls on dogs, because it makes that recall a little bit more important. I'll kind of use a combo of making my food or toy into a prey object, and then also I'm fading away, and depending on the dog, it's going to channel either more prey or more Pack Drive. Really, that would be something we'd have to ask the dog about.
Yeah. Yep.
Right, Dixie? What do you think? I need you to kill me.
Poor Dixie. She's so cute.
Her eyes get so crispy, crusty, and it's yucky, and I have to wash them.
Yeah, that happens to Dante, too.
You poor baby. She's double coated, too. She sheds so bad.
At least she has fur.
Yeah, it could be Bruno with the liver spots.
Yes. All right. So I think we've belabored this quite a bit. You know, when we're talking about building, increasing motivation and building drive, today's conversation was very much geared towards like your average dog. We're not talking about dogs that are looking to do sport or like protection training or scent detection or like police dogs or anything like that. The concepts are generally the same, but we would definitely want to talk more very specifics because, we're looking to get the dog to do specific things. Not saying we're not doing that with our pet dogs, but, once we have a dog who's wanting to work for something, it's a lot easier to get our dog to do even the simplest of tasks. So,
yeah.
Hopefully this has been a helpful episode. What were you going to say, Kelly?
I said Dixie's going through that right now with food.
Yeah.
Learning to work.
Hopefully this has been a really helpful episode for you. I have a fly who's literally landed on my camera. Hopefully this has been a super helpful episode that's going to help you take your training further and help you achieve your training goals in a more efficient and effective way. It's a very long road. I don't think people realize how long of a road it is from getting started to having my dog reliably do these behaviors in lieu of a reward, without like having a treat pouch on you all the time. Hell, if I take my senior German Shepherds out for a walk down the street, I still take my treat pouch, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it'd be hard to, I always say, if you're going to work every day, but you stop getting a paycheck, how long are you going to keep going to work for, right?
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind when you're expecting your dogs to behave or perform certain behaviors, but you don't feel like rewarding them.
Yeah. I feel like part of the thing, because I know you have, and I definitely have too, had consultations where the person's like, I don't want the dog to train for the food. Like, they want the dog to just do it kind of thing. And I feel like it's a misunderstanding. Like, they don't quite understand that. Like, I think they want to be able to tell their dog to sit without putting the biscuit in their face, is basically what they're asking. They just don't understand the nuances to get there, kind of thing. And I can still get my dog to sit and do all that stuff, but if I want to keep my command reliable, I need to make it worth it to do it. So that's usually the conversation I end up having with those people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, cool. All right. I think that's all we got for today. If anyone has any questions or any specific topics you would like us to cover in the future, I definitely want you to reach out and let us know. I think we have some really good topics coming up in the future as well. We've talked about a few of them. And so if there's anything that you would like to see as a listener or like to hear as a listener, shoot us a message, leave us comments. Social media these days, there's so many different ways you can reach us. Hell, if you want to give me a call, go nuts. Once again, I'm Ashley with Airborne Canine in Sanford, North Carolina. Kelly, where are you at?
I'm in Coppers Cove, Texas.
And that's KJK9.
Yeah.
Awesome. If you want to check out our stuff, we're all over social media. We have our websites are up and running. We have all the things. The Airborne Canine Gear Shop is fully locked and loaded and fully stocked. We are officially sold out of the North American Diving Dogs Air Retrieve bumpers. We are not restocking them because I've heard through very official channels, but not like officially, that they are getting new bumpers for next season again. So we are not restocking those. Yeah. There's drama. There's drama. There's always drama in the dog world, and it is getting bad these days. We were having a full conversation about all the tea and the gossip before we started the podcast today. But yeah, and that's in every corner of the dog training world. So
yeah,
just focus on training your dogs, have fun, be good to people. Kelley, any alibis?
Nothing really. If you need dog training, dog boarding, anything like that in Central Texas, I'm here. And yeah, that's it. I've been posting a lot of videos on my YouTube, so go check that out too.
Hell yeah. All right, folks, go out there, have a good time, and enjoy your day with your dog.